Welcome to the podcast today. I am sitting here with Cheryl Cardall, and I'm excited to talk to her about her family tree. But before I do that, I want to talk to Cheryl about her work and what she shares about online. She has her own podcast, and she shares a lot of really helpful things for parents dealing with children that may be more difficult than others, and how to have our hearts open to them and have a really attached relationship and a good relationship with our children and things there. So I've appreciated things that you share online, Cheryl. I know that the work you're doing is important and it's very dear to your heart. So can you just introduce yourself and let the listeners know a bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So, like Megan said, my name is Cheryl Cardall, and I am a mental health advocate and educator and parent kind of cheerleader and support and coach. And I started doing this work because of my own situation in my own family. I'm a mom of five. My kids are ages 14 to 25. They're getting so old. And my earring just fell out. Oh well. And we deal with a lot of mental health challenges in our family, and we have some neurospicy brains, which we like to call them. And I couldn't find people that were talking about them several years ago. I think it's opened up a lot more, and more people are talking about it, which is fantastic. So I decided to start talking about it and start sharing what we've learned and some of the work I've done myself in learning and researching and how to have a better relationship with some of these kids who have extra challenges and extra tough behaviors, etc. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. I do have a podcast called Fight Like a Mother, which is for parents raising these amazing and sometimes challenging kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. And what a great resource you are for people. Like, I think it can feel really lonely being a
Absolutely.
parent in that
Yes.
space. So creating that community and that space for people to come and get that support is huge. So
Yeah, and I do have a fantastic community on Instagram of parents and that are in that space, and they uplift and support each other and share their thoughts, and it's really a good space for
mhm.
parents to be.
Mhm. So what would you say to parents that maybe have a child that is, as you say, neurospicy, or maybe they haven't even been diagnosed as
Hmm.
anything, but they're just difficult.
Hmm.
I have one child that is a little more difficult than the others.
Hmm.
He likes to kind of be in charge of himself, which is not the easiest child to parent. But what would you say to someone that maybe is struggling with a child? Their behavior maybe isn't what they would like their child to behave like. They're struggling in school, all of those things. What would you say to a parent like that? What would you tell them to do?
I would say the most important thing that you can do is to learn how to shift your lens on the behaviors, because I have several parenting mantras that I repeat to myself that I have internalized myself. And the top one is that behavior is communication. And when kids are exhibiting challenging behaviors, there's something going on.
Mm.
And it's important for us, even if we can't pinpoint exactly what it is, I think even just having that mind shift that, there's another one that my kid isn't giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time.
Mhm.
That shift in our perspective focuses, instead of on, I have to stop this behavior, this is
Mhm.
wrong, this is bad. Okay, what could they be struggling with right now? And so it focuses on the child and their needs instead of on just stopping the behavior.
Yeah. No, that is huge. And I think sometimes it's almost a shameful thing. And even in
Mhm.
society, it's a shameful
Mhm.
thing. If your
Yeah.
child is acting out of school, they're being called down to the principal's office, whatever, that's happened to me. And
Yeah.
you go there and you're like, it's almost a shame-filled thing. They're like, this needs to stop. And they don't always take it from, okay, what's really going on here?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
How can we actually help this child in
And
the
I
classroom.
think, again, it's so important for parents to have that shift
Hmm.
and to work on feeling confident that we can advocate for them. And so, but we don't have to go in there in a confrontational way. We can just say, we have discovered that this child is struggling with some things that we're trying to figure out right now. So, how can we support this child instead of punishment, instead of blame and shame and all of that? Like,
Hmm.
we as parents, when we make that shift, we come in as a much better advocate for our child. We also can learn that their behavior is not our fault or responsibility. Yes, our responsibility is to teach and support and guide, but we can't control their behavior. And so I think when we can shift that, and it's hard because society does put it all on the parents, right? Oh, well,
Hmm.
you have to have them stop this behavior. Do you have any suggestions? I mean, we
Yeah,
don't have that control. And so I think when we go into a situation like that with a principal or a teacher or something, when we can go in like, yes, my child is having a hard time and needs some support. How can we work together to get them that kind of
right.
support?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's huge that their behavior is communication.
Hmm.
I don't think any kids go out there just to, you know, cause problems.
Yeah.
Like there's something going on.
Yes.
Um,
And sometimes they are a really strong personality.
right.
Maybe it's not even something deep down
Hmm.
that's wrong. Maybe it's just that they are a super strong personality. And from a very young age, they know what they want. They
Hmm.
know how they want to do it. And that can be hard to parent. But if you think about it, that's the kind of kid you want to raise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you think as an adult, having that type of personality is very helpful.
Yes.
So
Yes,
just not hard, not very easy to parent,
it's
but
true.
no, I think that perspective of understanding that our kids are just kids and we're here to be the adult and help them grow into a person and be the support for them and
Hmm.
not a punishment all the
Yeah.
time.
We're not the behavior monitor. We're
Right.
the relationship we're
That's
building
what I
with.
said. I always hate being I don't want to be a police officer
Yes.
as a parent. It's not my
Yes.
job. Well, I have been learning about kind of the effects of what our ancestors' life has, like things that went on in their life, how that affected them, their children, and kind of down the line.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of a similar conversation to, how we parent, how we raise our children, how we punish, how we, that environment that we create in our home. And like you said, our kids have agency. Like they can choose. The best parents in the world can have a kid that is behaviorally challenged or
Hmm.
whatever, right? Like
100%. Yes.
I feel like the environment we create doesn't always guarantee the outcome, right? So
Absolutely.
there's this thing called agency. But I think that there is kind of patterns that can happen in families
Hmm.
throughout generations. Have you found any of that kind of patterns or signs in your family or in other people's families that maybe you can kind of recognize that maybe there's things that we can change, in our generation, things that we want to
Yeah.
do
I
differently?
think looking back at different generations on both my side and my husband's side, some family members suffered from addiction, suffered from, rage and anger, and there was some abuse and things like that. And I think much of that was probably undiagnosed mental illness
Hmm.
that never got helpful because that was so shameful that wasn't talked about. They just were outcast and
Yeah.
shamed. And anyway, so yeah, I think on both sides of the family, there are individuals you can look at that you think, oh man, I wonder how their life would have been today if they could have
Hmm.
gotten the help that they needed.
Yeah. Well, I think even just how we parent, right? Like I
Mhm.
know I parent differently than my parents did, and I'm sure
Absolutely.
they did
Yes.
differently than theirs. So I think giving yourself a pat on the back to be like you're changing that for your kids is
Hmm.
a huge thing to recognize.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of my favorite quotes, and I'll probably massacre it, but it's we can't parent how past generations parented because the world we live in is
Mhm.
completely different.
Yeah.
They didn't deal with technology and social media and the 24/7 news cycle and,
Mhm.
so many conflicts in the world and things like that. It's just a completely different world. So we
Mhm.
do have to change things and parent
Mhm.
differently and
Yeah.
have different kinds of relationships.
Mhm. Yeah. We aren't all living on a farm with no
Exactly.
outside
My mom's
outside
my
influence.
my mom's world was kind of the cul-de-sac that we lived on, and then a few streets, and then our
Right.
ward that we lived in, our church, and her world was quite small. She wasn't comparing
Mhm.
herself to somebody across the country who lived
Mhm.
in the perfect home and dressed her kids perfectly and whatever. It was just that small little
Right.
world. And
Mhm.
now we have the world open to us on social media, and it's easy to compare and it's easy to see, oh, well, I must be a terrible parent because I don't do this. But,
Mhm.
it's just a completely different
Yeah.
life than our
No, it's a
parents
lot.
lived in.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to start sharing with you
Okay.
about your family.
Okay.
I know you have Middleton lines in your family. So
Yeah. My
I'm,
my grandma, my maternal grandma, her maiden name is Middleton.
mhm.
My dad is John Middleton Bevan. So yeah, it's a big, there we go.
There we go. Yeah. So this is your grandma, right? May
Uh-huh.
Middleton.
Yep.
Okay. So you wanted to know, I mean, you kind of in joking, you're like, I'd like to know if I'm related to Kate Middleton. Like that'd be cool,
That would be
right?
cool.
So I thought just for fun, let's see if that's a possibility, right? So Kate Middleton's family tree is online and her paternal line, so the Middleton line has been traced back to what I could find to 1757, probably before then, but her
Yeah.
ancestors lived in Yorkshire, England. And I traced your Middleton line back, is traced back to 1703, and they're all from Staffordshire, England. So
So probably not.
they're probably not related. Maybe if
Dang
you
it.
go back even further, but you're not going to be very closely related. So
We
that's a
still might
shame.
call her cousin Kate.
Sure. Sure. So we are not going to talk about Kate and
Okay.
the Middletons. We are going to actually focus on your second great grandmother, Mary Jane Jackson here.
Okay.
I don't know. I was trying to choose between these guys,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
Mary Jane won out. So
Okay.
we're going to learn about Mary Jane. So Mary Jane Jackson, she was born on the 5th of March, 1841 in, now I have to say all these names, Leicester. I know I'm not saying like Leicester. Anyways, England. Okay, she was the 11th child born to
Wow.
Thomas Jackson and Eleanor Waterhouse Wally. Her father, Thomas, was a traveling missionary at the time with the Primitive Methodist Church. So
Hmm.
their family, they traveled all around England. You can see where all of her older siblings were born. They're like all different counties all over the place in England. And she was the 11th born to them. So Mary's mother, you can see Eleanor, she passed away in
I was
1842.
to say, wasn't she born in 1841?
Yeah.
So her mom died
Mary,
young.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Mary was almost 2 years old. She was born in March. So, and Eleanor died on Christmas Eve in 1842. So around this time, kind of just before this time, it seems that Thomas took leave from being a traveling missionary. I think probably having 11 children and traveling all over probably turned to be too much.
Hmm.
And he's listed as a grocer in some census records and a bookkeeper after that. It does seem like he went back to the missionary service a bit later. And he died in 1873 when Mary was almost 32. So here's the children of Thomas Jackson and Eleanor Waterhouse Wally. I'm not sure if you can see that.
We can.
So there's 11, I believe that's 11, 6, 9, 10, 11. Yep. 11 children. And Mary Jane is here, the youngest. There was no census records for the family
Hmm.
until 1861. So by then, Mary Jane was not living with her father, and her mother, Eleanor, had passed away. But I wanted to know more about Mary Jane's childhood. So I was looking for the 1841 census. So in England, they do censuses every 10 years. Starting in 1841, they listed everyone in the household, 51, 61. So she was born in March of 1841
Hmm.
in Leicester, England. So I was pretty sure they'd be living close to there, right? 2 months
Mhm.
later is when the census was normally taken in June. So they should have been living in the same place. And on her birth registration in when she was born in March, it actually gives a street that they were living on as Rutland Street in Leicester.
I'm just sorry I to interrupt you. I'm just looking at how
Oh,
many
you're good.
children died. One, two,
Yes.
three, four children.
Yeah.
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 And two Ebenezer's.
Yeah. So you can see Ebenezer died
Yeah.
in 1840, even before Mary Jane was born. And we don't know the years on those. They could have
Yeah.
died earlier too. And
Just
then
maybe even as a
Marianne.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. I just had noticed
Yeah.
that.
So they probably didn't even have all 11 children. And actually we'll
Mhm.
see on the census that I found them in how many children were living in 1841. But so I was looking all over for this Thomas Jackson in Leicester and surrounding counties. I couldn't find him anywhere. I was looking for his wife Eleanor, looking for her anywhere. I couldn't find her. So then I looked for Mary Jane. I did find one Mary Jane, but like the parents' names weren't right, so I just kind
Mm,
of glanced over it. I didn't notice the street that they were living in, but eventually on Find My Past, you can search by address.
mm.
So I searched for Rutland Street in 1841. There wasn't a household, like we didn't know the house numbers. So I looked through 61 houses that lived on
Wow.
Rutland Street. And here, this is Rutland Street. That's where they lived in Leicester. It's kind of close
Mm-hmm.
to Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking all over, found this census, zoomed in here. So we have Mary Jane is 2 months old.
Mm.
So that fits. We have Jabez is 2. Sophia is 6, William is 9, Samuel is 11, Eleanor's 14, Thomas is 13. Not sure why they do it like in descending age. And then Jane and Charles Jackson are the parents, and
Mm.
he's a
Mm-hmm.
bookkeeper. Like, well, that's interesting. All of the
Yeah.
household members, this N here says that they were not born in that county of Leicestershire, except for Mary Jane was.
Mm.
I'm like, okay. So then let's compare those names to what we have on Family Tree and
Yeah.
Family Search, and they're matching up, right? So we have Mary Jane, Ebenezer had died already, but we have Jabez, who's the same age. We have Sophia. These two probably died. Well, this one died before, and Maria must have. And we have William, Samuel, Thomas, and Eleanor. So all of their ages are matching up. The only thing is the names of the parents. I'm like,
Oh, interesting.
that's weird. So I thought, well, maybe we have the wrong family. Like maybe these children are attached to the wrong parents on Family Search. But that's not the case because you have birth records on Family Search for these children with the Thomas Jackson and Eleanor Waterhouse
Huh.
Wally, which Waterhouse Wally, like that's not a common name, right?
Right.
So I'm not sure why their names were different,
Hmm.
why they were recorded incorrectly. Thomas had left the ministry as a missionary. And I know the primitive church, maybe there was maybe he was almost hiding. I don't know. Maybe these were their middle names, but I'm pretty confident this is actually the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did they
So,
only have six living there?
yeah, so there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Seven.
So there's 7 out of the 11,
Oh.
which, yeah, makes sense there. So then I did a little more digging into Thomas, and there's actually quite a lot online about him
Mm.
just because he was a missionary and a minister. On this website, it says that he disappears from the ministry circuit in 1834, but then returns in later censuses. So I'm not sure if there was something going
Mm-hmm.
on there. Maybe he had to, I don't know, go up by a
You wonder,
different
was his
name.
wife sick? Because she died.
Maybe, right, because she died the next year. So who
Yeah.
knows what was going on? I'm not sure why they would have had different names, but maybe those were just their middle names. I don't know. So I'm not really sure what Mary Jane's childhood would have been like, but her mother died when she was almost 2. And then her father remarried in 1843 when she was 2.5. And that wife died around 1850 when Mary was 10 years old. And then by the time Mary is 20, her father had married 2 more times with
Oh,
with each
wow.
wife dying and remarrying.
So much loss for her.
Yeah. So I just wanted to pause here for a minute and ask you, what do you think Mary's childhood might have been like. When she was almost 2, her mother died. The youngest of, I mean, 7 surviving children, her father remarrying several times. What do you think that might have been like for her?
Probably was chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It probably was confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine having all these, new moms come in and then they're dying, lots of grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I hope there was happiness and, joy and love, but I just think, oh, this little girl experienced
Mm-hmm.
so much loss
Mm-hmm.
in her young life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't going to share this part, but I feel like I'm going to. But so Mary Jane's, let me just go back here. Mary Jane's older brother, William, he actually, I'm not sure what year, but he met with the Mormon missionaries in England and joined the church.
Hmm.
And his father disowned him. So I thought that was interesting because his father, Thomas, like he converted from a religion to this primitive Methodist church. But when his son did the same thing with the Mormons, he was disowned.
That's really interesting because
Yeah.
my grandma May Middleton is the first one to join in
Hmm.
my family
In
line
your
that we
line.
knew
Yeah,
of.
I was wondering that.
So interesting that there was somebody before
Before
her.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, so her uncle
Yeah,
would have joined before.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah. Yeah. So then at the age of 23, Mary Jane, your second great grandmother, married
Mhm.
Jeffrey Alfred Balmer. He was a bricklayer, so this is their
Mhm.
marriage record. They were both living in Church Gressley, which was nearby to Leicester. And these are their actual signatures on their marriage
Wow.
document. You can see how the handwriting's different
Yes,
than everything else there. So that's their signature. So I thought that was cool. It's always
that
neat
is
to see
cool.
your actual
Yeah.
signature. So you know that they were educated and could read and write because a lot of people at that time couldn't. So this is the church that they would have been
Mm.
married in. This is the parish church that they were married in 1865. Now, interestingly, they were not married in the primitive Methodist chapel where Mary Jane's father was a missionary and minister, but they were married in the Church of England church.
Mhm.
And then here is just to show how far Church Gressley is from where she was born. It's about 30 miles, so
Okay.
not too far. So here is a death record that I saw attached to your tree on Family Search for a Catherine Balmer. She's listed as the daughter of Mary Jane and Jeffrey. And it says that she was just 0 days old when she died. So
Mm.
this would have been their third child born to them. On Family Search, it has her birthday as the 2nd of November, 1869. So I'm like, that's kind of weird,
A
but
little
there's no
different. Yeah.
source or anything unless this isn't actually her, but her birth record could be ordered to verify that. But I do think it is their child, and you'll see that in a little bit. But so then by 1871, 6 years after they were married, they were living in Church Gressley still with their children. So you see Alfred J is their son here, who's 5 years old,
Mhm.
and then Thurza,
Mhm.
who's 3.
I have
And
an aunt
Thurza,
Thurza named after her.
right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thurza, she is actually your great
Great.
grandmother,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's who you descend from their second born child,
Mhm.
Thurza. So, and then Mary Jane, I thought it was interesting. She was listed as an infant school mistress.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and her husband was a bricklayer, a journeyman bricklayer. So their third child, Catherine, had died about 6 months before this census was taken.
Right.
And then by 1881, Jeffrey was now listed
Mhm.
as a bricklayer and insurance agent. So
Mhm.
took on another job.
Yeah.
And Mary Jane was a dame school mistress. So I looked up what a dame school mistress, that's for a private school. So she was a school mistress at a private school.
Mhm.
They now had at least 7 children that were living here. And your great grandmother was 13 and the oldest daughter. And it says that she was at home. So see here you can see her older brother was a bricklayer laborer,
Mhm.
probably working with
Mhm.
his father. She's at home. The next youngest is at school.
Hmm.
And so I assume Thurza probably stayed home to care for all these young children while
Right.
her mother
Well,
was a
mother worked.
schoolmistress. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. You don't often see the mothers working. So I thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Look at that handwriting.
Yeah. No, that's actually really nice handwriting on
It
there.
is. It's easy to read, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. So you can see they were living on Hastings Road. So they don't have the house number, but these are some of the houses on that street, which is actually in Cote
Mm,
now. So here's Church Gressley. So it might have been part of Church Gressley when they lived there, but now
right.
it's part of Swan. I don't know how to say that. Swadlin Cote. Probably saying it wrong. But then by 1891, they had moved to Smethwick, Staffordshire, which is west of Birmingham, so on the other side of Birmingham. And here they are with their four youngest children. So Mary Jane's husband was now a foreman bricklayer, and there's no occupation for Mary Jane now. So maybe once they moved, maybe she stopped working as a
Was she older
schoolmistress.
than he was? Was she 50 and he was 46?
It does say 50 and 46. Yeah.
Okay, we have some history of that in the family.
Do you?
Yes, I'm 3.5 years older than my husband. Both my grandmothers were older than their husbands. That's funny to see that.
Oh, funny. Yeah, and like I didn't even notice that before. Is that right for yeah, 39 and
Mm-hmm.
36? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she was a bit older. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
So then she's here with their four youngest children, and their 14-year-old son is listed a bricklayer laborer, probably working with his father, and then a scholar. So this 12-year-old must not been in school, but is not working formally.
Hmm.
So your great grandmother Thurza was married by this time, and she actually stayed in Church Gressley. So, oh, and this picture, this is the address, this on this corner, probably
For
here,
the men's
but
haircut.
it's now a haircut place.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that is what the house would have been like. It might have been like a row house like this,
Mhm.
a little taller,
Mhm.
but that was where they lived. So these houses down the street were probably still there when
Probably
they
more
lived
like,
there.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then by 1901, Mary Jane's husband, Jeffrey, had died 7 years earlier in 1894. And she was now listed as a grocer and corn dealer.
Corn dealer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
with and there was four of their children were living with her now. So she had some of her older children back. Her daughter Clarissa was a dressmaker. William, Eleanor, and Florence were all living with her. And this is actually the house that they were living in. So they were living at 1 Lightwoods Road. It was less than a mile from where they were living 10 years earlier.
Mhm.
Maybe they had a little shop here in the bottom floor. I don't know, but now it's a vet. So that's
Interesting.
kind
Yeah.
of fun. And then here is the probate index for the will for her husband, Jeffrey. It just says Jeffrey Alfred of 365 Bearwood Road, Smethwick. So that's where they were living in 1891. I can't read that. We'll read over here. He was a builder's foreman, died the 15th of May, 1894, and the probate was done on the 18th of June. And it says to Mary Jane Balmer, widow, effects of 190 pounds.
So not a whole lot.
Well, actually not too bad. I
I
looked
guess
up
back in that day, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
I looked up, according to the Bank of England, that's worth about 20,000 pounds
Oh,
today.
okay.
So not a
Too
huge
bad.
amount, but not penniless.
Right.
So yeah, so I actually ordered this probate record. You can get them online for 1.5 pounds, but it will take about 2 weeks to get here. So
Mm.
I just ordered that today. So I'm like, oh, I should have done that a long time ago. But I came across this yesterday. So maybe I'll do a little update in a couple weeks or just send that
Okay.
to you. But
Awesome. That would be great.
we'll see if it has anything of interest. But yeah, let's just stop there for a minute. So, what do you think, Mary Jane? So, she's now widowed. She was widowed at the age of 53, with her youngest child being 10 years old. What do you think that might have been like for her?
It was probably very difficult because single women in that time, it would have been hard to actually make a living, to have the capacity to kind of, I don't know, speak up for herself, maybe might have been
Yeah. I thought it was
difficult.
interesting that she was a grocer and corn
Uh-huh.
dealer. Like
Uh-huh.
maybe being a schoolmistress didn't pay very much. I don't know.
Right. Or maybe,
It's-
it was too demanding with
Right.
being a
with
single
other
mom.
kids there.
You
Yeah.
wonder if there was a little shop in that downstairs. Maybe
Hmm.
that's where she was a grocer. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that
But
would make sense.
yeah, so I'm sure she would had to be super hardworking and resourceful
Hmm.
and, frugal.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think that was really neat that she just started doing something. So then I I like to look for everyone in the census records because they kind of give an overall kind of understanding of what their life was at that time every 10 years.
Hmm.
And the 1911 census, it wasn't on Family Search, it wasn't attached to her yet. So I found that, and I believe this is her, living in the Birmingham and Midland Eye Hospital.
Oh, interesting. What's the
So she was a patient there. So I looked into this institute. It like opened up in the early 1800s, like a doctor, surgeon decided to start this eye hospital, like for, I don't know who would go there, people that are blind or
were they
need surgery.
blind? Yeah, was she
I'm not sure
blind?
exactly.
Yeah.
So she was now 70 years old and was listed as a widow. These columns here, it lists how many children were born alive to them, how many are still living, and then how many are deceased.
Hmm.
They cross these out. I'm wondering if that's just because they weren't necessarily supposed to record that for these patients. I don't know. But this matches with what we have that she had 9 children. That one daughter, Catherine, would have passed away. So that's why I think that Catherine is her, that's correct. Family Search, they do have another Alfred born to them, but it was like 6 years before they married and he
Hmm.
died 3 years later. So I'm not sure if that's actually right. But it seems to match with our Mary Jane Bomber that she was living at this hospital. So this is what the hospital actually looked like in 1900. So it's quite an elaborate,
It is.
nice building. And they do have records for this hospital, but you have to actually go to Birmingham and
Hmm.
go to the archive to get them. So
Hmm.
if you ever go there, you can maybe look up her records at this
Love to
hospital
go
and
to, I
see.
would love to go to England again and
Yeah,
find some of this
yeah.
stuff.
And you could see, why she was there and all of that. But she died a year later, I believe.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if she was still at the hospital or not, but thought it'd be interesting to see where her other children were living at the time in
Yes.
1911 too. So here is her two daughters, her two youngest daughters, Eleanor and Florence. They're both single. They're living at the same address that she was living in 1901 when she had that grocer. So, and it says that Eleanor was a restaurant cashier. So who knows? Maybe they opened a little restaurant in the
Who
in the
knows?
bottom floor and she was the cashier. I don't know, but they were both living there. And then her other son, William, who's the next old, third youngest, was living also in Smethwick as a bricklayer. So maybe he kind of took over his father's business. I don't know, but he was living there in Smethwick. So Birmingham was not too far from there. So
Hmm.
I'm sure they visited their mom a lot and and kept her company while she was at that hospital. So then I thought it'd be interesting to see where your great grandmother was in 1911, Thurza. So she's still living in Church Gressley, and they had a whole bunch of children.
Hmm.
And her husband was actually a bricklayer also. So they stayed in Church Gressley. So maybe he, continued his father-in-law's business as a bricklayer. I'm not sure. Maybe there was just a whole bunch of bricklayers in the area. I mean, all the buildings were made of brick, so
Hmm.
I'm sure there was a market for lots of
Right.
bricklayers.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so then Mary Jane passed away the next year. We don't know what from, but we could always order the death record to. They actually don't put the cause of death on the death record, so we wouldn't know. But so she
Mhm.
was, I didn't even calculate. She was born in 1841, so she would have been in 1912. What's that? Do some math.
I'm not good at math, but 70 something, right?
1912 minus 1841. Yeah, 71. Oh, that makes sense. She was 70 the year before.
Yeah.
But yeah, but so that's what I have for you about your great
Well,
great
thank
grandmother, Mary Jane Jackson.
thank you. Well, and it's interesting if you go back to that screen, May's kind of in the middle of their kids, but my mom and dad have been to England several times and made contact with May's sister, Dora. They met Dora and Dora's daughter, Bronwyn, they've become very close to.
Oh, cool.
And so there's been the kind of that connection
Oh,
to
neat.
the family. So
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure like you have a lot of heritage there in England, so that would
Mhm.
be. Have you been to England?
I have.
You
Yeah.
have.
I was
Yeah.
able to go when I was 18. I went with my parents and met Bronwyn and her family, and she has some things of her mother's and probably some things maybe of May's.
Hmm.
And then I was able to go back in 98 with my husband when my
Oh,
parents were
cool.
serving a mission there. So
Oh, cool.
anyway, yeah,
Well,
been able
neat.
to go there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's always like when I start these projects and kind of just choose someone, seems like the more I dig in, the more I'm like, oh, look at this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the thing,
Yeah,
like
and
if
it's
I didn't,
interesting. I didn't know anything about her.
right.
So thank you. I really
Yeah, no,
appreciate. I
it's
know a lot more
interesting.
about May and some of the other family, but didn't know
Hmm.
anything about her. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really fascinating. My mom will love this.
Yeah. Well, I'll be sure to send you all the stuff I found. And I didn't change anything in Family Search and the family tree just because I know some people are particular about how they want things. So, but
Right.
I'll send you all the stuff and your family can do with it as they
That would
want. But
that would be great.
yeah, well, thank you so much, Cheryl. This has been fun to talk with you and to share a bit of your family with you.
It has been
Um,
fun. It's been
yeah,
very interesting to learn about.
yeah. Well,
So,
all right. Well, thanks, Cheryl.
thank
I'll
you.
link to your podcast and everything. What is your Instagram
My
username?
Instagram is just my name, Cheryl Cardall. So
Okay. So if people
you can
want to go
find me
find
there.
her and get some support with your children and parenting and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks,
All right.
Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. If you want to do the same sort of thing, like really getting to know who one of your ancestors were, you can get my course, Know Your Ancestor, by going to knowyourancestorcourse.com, and you can sign up, get instant access to my online course. This course takes you from choosing an ancestor that you want to learn about, to looking at all of the records that you have about them, to learning how to find additional records, and then really building their story, getting to know who they were as an actual human being person, not just their names and dates, but really looking at what experiences they had, what those experiences might have been like for them, how they would have affected them, how they would have affected their posterity, and ultimately how their life has affected you today. It's a really powerful course, and if you want to dive in deep and really get to know your ancestors, this is the best way that I know of to do that. So go ahead to knowyourancestorcourse.com to sign up. And thanks again for listening today. If you can leave a rating and review on iTunes or on Spotify and share it with your friends and family, that would be great. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.